This lecture will discuss ethics, and specifically ethics as it relates to businesses. Now, ethics is the study of what constitutes right and wrong behavior, and it focuses on morality and the application of moral principles in everyday life. Some of the concepts we're going to talk about related to the nature of business ethics and the relationship between ethics and the law. Because of this relationship, having a careful study of business law is going to help you understand what is and what isn't considered by society to be ethical behavior. Throughout this lecture, the relationship between particular laws and the broad underlying ethical premise on which they rest, we're going to talk about. And that will be talked about throughout this course. This lecture is also going to talk about issues that are involved in determining business ethical responsibility. So business ethics involves the application of ethical standards in regards to business activities. Ultimately, the goal here is to understand tools for analyzing ethical and social responsibility issues in a business context. Now, exactly how to decide these issues is something each individual has to do alone on the basis of each person's own convictions, because all of our convictions are different. So we're going to look at just what is business, setting the right tone in a company, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act that was passed as a result of unethical behavior, and then we're going to just talk about ethical reasoning and how ethics gets played out within social media and on a global level. So, ethics. What is ethics? Ethics is the study of what constitutes good behavior or right behavior and what constitutes bad behavior or wrong behavior. Now, ethics gets played out as we deal with laws. As you know, laws change. Ethical ideas of what used to be unethical may change in ethical behavior. Business ethics, it focuses on what constitutes ethical behavior in the world of business. It's really not a separate kind of ethics. An understanding of business ethics is important to the long-run viability of a business, because the well-being of the officers and the directors, and ultimately all the employees. Ethics concerns an individual's moral judgments about right and wrong. Decisions taken within an organization may be made by individuals or groups, but whoever makes those decisions will be influenced by the culture of a company. I'm sure some of you guys have worked for companies that have a really quality attitude of doing the right thing, and then you may have also worked at the opposite type of company. The decision to behave ethically is a moral one, and each employee has to decide what they think is the right course of action. Sometimes this involves rejecting the route that would lead them to the biggest short-term profit. So ethical behavior and corporate social responsibility that we're going to be talking about can bring great benefits to companies. So, for example, they may attract customers to firm products, which might mean boosting sales and profits, or they can make employees want to stay within the business, reducing labor turnover and ultimately increasing productivity. They can attract more employees wanting to work for the business, reduce recruitment costs, and help the organization get the most talented employees. They also, this behavior can attract investors to keep the company's share price high and protect the business from potential takeover. Knowing that a company they deal with has stated their morals and made a promise to work in a right and responsible manner allows investors peace of mind that their money is being used in a way that arranges with their own moral standing. When working for a company with strong business ethics, employees also can be comfortable in the knowledge they're not, by their own action, allowing unethical practices to continue. Customers are at ease buying products or services from a company they know to source their materials and labor in an ethical and responsible way. Let's look at an example of this. So we've got a coffee company, and they promote that all their beans are picked from sustainable plants where no deforestation has occurred, and they're picked by people that are paid a good living wage in areas where investments have been made to make sure that producing the coffee for a foreign market hasn't damaged the local lifestyle. And we'll find that all these elements of their buying strategy become a selling point for their final product. Now, companies which set out to work within its own ethical guidelines is also less at risk of being fined for bad behavior and less likely to find themselves in breaching some laws. Reputation also is something that's really important to a company and one of the most difficult things to rebuild if it gets lost. So maintaining promises it's made is really important to keeping that reputation. Businesses not following any kind of ethical code or carrying out their social responsibility ultimately has some bigger consequences because unethical behavior can damage firms' reputation and make it less appealing for people to want to be a part of them and invest in them. As a result, profits go down. So in this world, it can be affected by lack of business ethics. When a business doesn't show that they care for where it disposes its waste products or fails to take a long-term view when buying up a bunch of land for development, it damages the world in which we all live and ultimately damages the future prospects of companies. So I hope you see ethics is important for a lot of reasons. It increases sales and it can increase their reputation. So now we're going to talk about setting the right ethical tone. Management must set and apply ethical standards that they're committed to, and employees probably are going to follow in their footsteps. Ethical conduct can be furthered by not tolerating bad behavior. Also, when managers set realistic goals for their employees and have periodic employee reviews. So these most large companies, they have code of conduct that indicate what the company's commitment is to compliances and to the welfare of those who get affected by their corporate decisions and practices. A lot of large firms emphasize ethics in other ways, such as in training programs and education. Companies usually have components of comprehensive corporate ethical compliance. Programs include ethical codes of conduct. There's an ethics committee, training programs, internal audits to help monitor compliance. And these components need to be integrated. We're going to talk about Sarbanes-Oxley, which basically has changed the way a lot of businesses do business and requires firms to set up systems that can report bad behavior. A firm's duty to its shareholders needs to be weighed against duties to others who may have a greater stake in certain decisions. So, for example, an employer who should consider whether it has an ethical duty to be loyal, long-term employees, not to replace them with workers who will accept lower pay, and whether this duty prevails over a duty to improve profitability by restructuring the organization. Unethical conduct resulted in the largest bankruptcy of a United States business firm. So based on poor behavior, a lot of companies lose out in the long run. Now, the Sarbanes-Oxley Act, it's known as the SOX Act of 2002, imposes requirements of a public accounting firm that provides auditing services to an issuer, which is a company that sells securities to investors. Among other things, this act created what's called the Public Company Accounting Oversight Board, or the PCAOB, to oversee audits. This act also prohibits destroying or falsifying records to obstruct justice or influence a federal investigation, or in relation to bankruptcy, with sanctions that include fines and imprisonment for up to 20 years. So this has been a wide sweeping act that has changed the manner in which a lot of companies must do business. The minimal acceptable standard for ethical business behavior is to obey the law. Ethical standards, such as those in a company's policies or code of ethics, must also guide decisions. Because there are many laws regulating business, it's impossible to violate one without realizing it. Remember that saying that ignorance of the law is no excuse? Isn't that the truth? There are many gray areas in which it's difficult to predict how a court's going to rule. So, for example, if a consumer's misuse of a product harms the consumer, should the manufacturer bear the responsibility? Ultimately, we know the best course of action is to act responsibly and always act in good faith. As we talk about ethics, there are various approaches to looking at ethics. Ethical reasoning is the process by which individuals look at a situation according to their convictions morally or their ethical standards. So there are various fundamental approaches. Duty-based ethics would be ethics based on religion, philosophy, or the principle of rights. Now, religious standards provide that when an act is prohibited by religious teachings, it's unethical and shouldn't be undertaken, regardless of what the consequences are. Religious standards also oftentimes provide compassion, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, such as the Golden Rule. Regarding philosophy, ethical standards can be based on a concept of duty that could be derived solely from philosophical principles. So, a postulate in the Ethics of Immanuel Kant, for example, is that individuals should evaluate their actions in light of the consequences that would follow if everyone in society acted the same way. This categorical imperative can be applied in any action. And then regarding the principle of rights, according to this principle, that people have rights to life, to liberty, to the pursuit of happiness. A key factor in determining whether a business decision is ethical is how that decision affects the rights of others, including employees, customers, and society. Outcome-based ethics, such as the utilitarian philosophy, was developed by a man named Jeremy Bentham, and also later on John Stuart Mill advanced it, and it focused on the consequences of an action, not on the nature of the action itself or on any set of pre-established moral or religious beliefs. An action is morally correct or, quote, right, when among the people it affects, it produces the greatest amount of good for the greatest number of people. In applying this utilitarian theory, it requires a determination of which individuals will be affected by an action, a cost-benefit analysis of which is basically like an assessment of the negative and positive effects of various alternative actions. And then a choice among alternative actions that could produce maximum societal benefits, or the best scenario among society as a whole. An example of utilitarianism is a pharmaceutical company releasing a drug that has been governmentally approved with known side effects because the drug is able to help more people than are bothered by the minor side effects. This utilitarianism form often shows that the end justifies the means mentality. The question of corporate social responsibility concerns the extent to which a corporation should act ethically and be accountable to society in that regard. There are 4 different approaches regarding CSR. The stakeholder approach is where stakeholders include employees, customers, creditors, suppliers, and the community within the business operates. It is sometimes said that duties to these groups should be weighed against the duty to a firm's owners. The corporate citizen approach is where corporations are urged to actively promote social goals. It's a way of doing business, which some argue that this should be pursued as a way of doing business rather than as a special program. And then the last means of dealing with CSR relates to the employee recruiting and retention advantage. And again, some of the people suggest that these activities should be relevant and significant to a firm's stakeholders. This focus can help a firm retain its employees, especially the really good young workers. I want to talk about Google China. Doing business on a global level can sometimes involve a lot of ethical challenges. Consider the ethical firestorm that erupted when Google Inc. decided to market Google China. This version of Google's widely used search engine was really tailored to the Chinese government's censorship requirements. To date, the Chinese government maintains strict control over the flow of information in that country, and the government's goal is to stop the flow of harmful information. Websites that offer pornography, government criticism, or information on other sensitive topics such as the Tiananmen Square massacre in '89 get censored, which means they can't be accessed by web users. The government agencies enforce the censorship and encourage citizens to inform on one another. Thousands of websites get shut down each year, and the site's operators get sometimes even imprisoned. Google's code of conduct opens with the company's informal motto, "Don't be evil." Yet critics of Google's actions question whether Google's following this motto. Human rights groups have come out strongly against Google's behavior, saying that the company is seeking profits in a lucrative marketplace at the expense of assisting the Communist Party in suppressing free speech. In February of 2006, Democratic Congressman Tom Lantos, the only Holocaust survivor serving in Congress, stated that the sickening collaboration of Google and 3 other web companies, Cisco, Microsoft, and Yahoo, with the Chinese government was decapitating the voice of dissidents in a nation. So basically, Google, of course, defends its actions by pointing out that its Chinese search engine at least lets users know which sites are being censored. Google China includes the links to censored sites, but when a user tries to access that link, the program states it's not accessible. Google claims that its approach is essentially the lesser of 2 evils. If U.S. companies didn't cooperate with the Chinese government, Chinese residents would have less user-friendly internet access. Also, Google asserts that providing internet access, even if it's censored, is a step toward more open access in the future because technology is in itself a revolutionary force. different ways of looking at the same issue. Business ethics and social media. Employers can sometimes review job candidates, Facebook pages, blogs, and tweets. Some may reject candidates who do not participate in social media. Judging a job candidate based on what she or he does outside the workplace can seem unethical. I know my daughter, when she was applying for the bar in Florida, was informed that the Florida bar would look at all her social media to make sure that she was capable of receiving that license. There's a new sport in consumer marketing where brand leaders watch with delight as their peers stumble on issues when dealing with social media. In the past, Nestle, the Red Cross, and Kenneth Cole have all made big, costly errors managing social media. And the problem goes well beyond just bad PR or public relations. The question for marketing leaders is how to develop a process to steer large organizations around the perils of interacting with consumers on social platforms. It's not helpful that the rules are clearly different online. Consumers have less tolerance for unexpected email from favored brands than unwanted catalogs from unknown brands in their physical mailbox. Privacy concerns are heightened, and as trust is the prized currency of social media, ethical lapses or oversights can be really deadly for brands. Crisis management is a topic for another day, but there are 5 things that businesses really need to avoid when dealing with social media. First, unreported endorsements. 2 years ago, the FTC updated its guidelines on endorsements and testimonials to cover social media. In a nutshell, if you're giving any form of compensation to a blogger or tweeter, it's considered a compensated endorsement and it has to be disclosed. This includes free product or in-kind compensations, and it covers all social media, not just the bloggers. So in 2006, Walmart suffered a slew of negative publicity when its PR agency, Edelman, supported 2 bloggers road tripping across the United States writing positive stories about Walmart through the organization Working Families for Walmart. The blogging was gaining traction until Business Week broke the story that the trip expenses for the blogger was being paid indirectly by Walmart. Another thing to avoid is improper anonymity. It can be tempting to have your agencies comment anonymously on online forums to promote products, raise questions about competitors, or just even correct bad information, but doing so without revealing the company's involvement can be risky. Whole Foods CEO John Mackey found this out the hard way in 2007 when he revealed to have pseudonymously trashed competitor Wild Oats online before trying to buy them. Even if your anonymous online contributors aren't illegal, they risk ruining the trust of your consumers. Phony online reviews are one of the biggest plagues for honest retailers now, and you don't want to get lumped in with practices like that. Compromising consumer privacy. The data available on individual consumers is a resource that companies are understandably trying to mine. Done properly, it's a win-win. Consumers get better, more relevant offers, and brands waste less on poorly targeted advertising. But there's a line past which using information means violating privacy. DoubleClick, the online advertiser since acquired by Google, found this out in 2000 when they attempted to combine offline purchase data from consumers with their online persona. Overly enthusiastic employees. Your employees have been engaged in social media as individuals for longer than you have as an organization, and some of them may have established reputations and strong bases of fans or followers. They may be inclined to spread word about the great things your brand is doing, and if they do so without acknowledging their connection to the company, they're violating consumer trust. Beyond that, there's a real risk of employees inadvertently disclosing material information about your public company and risking myriad legal implications. Recently, a Google employee accidentally published a scathing critique of Google on Google. Best to train employees carefully about disclosure and have a clear policy in place. Using the online community to get free work. Brands call it UGC, user-generated content, but in creative circles it's becoming known as WFF, working for free. The story is familiar, where a brand holds an online contest allowing ordinary consumers to submit copy, designs, or even produced commercials. The company picks a winner, gives prizes, and uses the creative media. The dirty little secret of user-generated content is that it's mostly not your neighborhood plumber who wins, but real creatives, freelanced or unemployed. These are professionals who should be paid for their work. And another troubling spin on this trend happens when companies put out a request for proposal for a social media campaign, gather up all the most creative ideas that come out of the process, then use them without hiring the particular agencies who created it. Overall, it's okay to engage consumers and to reach widely for the best creative talent, but there's a fine line between that. A sense of what is ethical varies from individual to individual and from group to group, from nation to nation, and these ethics vary over time. An example of how ethics vary over time relate to employment discrimination. Business ethics on a global scale can be complex given the differing cultures and religions in other countries. Monitoring the employment practices of foreign suppliers is needed, as concerns include the rights and the treatment of foreign workers who make goods imported and sold in the United States by U.S. firms. Should a U.S. firm refuse to deal with certain suppliers or make arrangements to monitor their workplaces to make sure that the workers are not being mistreated? The Foreign Corrupt Practices Act relate to side payments to government officials in exchange for favorable business contracts. This isn't unusual in companies. Oftentimes bribes are just a normal business practice in countries. And they're not even considered unethical in other countries, but in the United States, that is illegal. Bribery of foreign officials in the U.S., the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act prohibits U.S. business people from bribing foreign officials to secure advantageous contracts. Accountants in particular may be subject to penalties for making false statements in records or accounts. Internationally, a treaty signed by the members of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development also makes the bribery of foreign officials a crime. Business firms could be fined up to $2 million. Individuals can be fined up to $100,000, and the firm isn't allowed to pay that fine. And imprisonment can be up to 5 years. We're going to look at an example in closing. The sales of some of Golden West's products are at an all-time low. Golden West sets up Four Oaks. It's a new company and convinces employees involved with the poor-selling products to transfer their retirement benefits to Four Oaks. Golden West expects Four Oaks to fall within 2 years. So is it legal for Golden West to keep a secret of its expectations from the employees? No, it's not. Under federal law, it's illegal for an employer that provides retirement benefits to deceive the recipients in order to save the employer money at the recipient's expense. Now, another question, is it ethical for Golden West to keep its expectations secret? Nope, it's not, although some groups including the firm owners and some current employees, could benefit in the short term from Golden West's actions, compliance with the law is regarded as the moral minimum. In closing, I want you to be reminded, based on this topic, that ethics really do matter. They matter from an individual standpoint, and they really matter when it comes to business.